The photograph was taken on July 16, 1851, in a clearing approximately 2.3 miles northwest of the Whitmore Plantation in eastern Tennessee, by traveling photographer Samuel Brooks, who'd been hired by plantation owner Richard Whitmore to document unusual wildlife specimens on his property for the price of $4.25. The image shows a black man in his late 20s sitting on a tree stump beside a brown bear that stands approximately 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weighs an estimated 420 pounds. Both subjects positioned in forest setting with sunlight filtering through pine trees in the background. What Brooks' camera couldn't capture during the 70-second exposure time was that the man, whose name was Marcus Raines, was enslaved property valued at $2,400 in Whitmore's estate ledgers, that he'd found the bear as a 3-month-old cub abandoned in the forest 8 years earlier in 1843 and had raised it in secret ever since, and that over the next 4 years between 1851 and 1855, Marcus would use the bear he'd named Brutus to kill 6 different plantation owners across 3 Tennessee counties, staging the deaths to appear as random bear attacks while actually executing a calculated assassination campaign that would eventually free Marcus and 43 other enslaved people when the final targeted plantation owner's death left an estate with no direct heirs and triggered legal complications that resulted in mass manumission. Marcus Raines was 28 years old, stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighed approximately 185 pounds, and had been enslaved since birth on the Whitmore plantation, where his mother worked as a house servant and his father, before being sold to Mississippi when Marcus was 7, had worked as a field hand. Richard Whitmore operated a tobacco plantation with 67 enslaved workers and also maintained extensive forest land used for hunting expeditions that generated additional income through selling wild game meat and furs to regional markets. Marcus had been assigned to hunting work at age 12 when Whitmore recognized his aptitude for tracking animals. And over the next 16 years, Marcus had become the plantation's most skilled hunter, regularly bringing back deer, wild turkey, rabbit, and occasionally bear that provided protein for the enslaved community and profit for Whitmore when excess meat was sold. The bear cub that would become Brutus was found by Marcus on April 3, 1843. During a solo hunting expedition in the forest section approximately 4 miles west of the Whitmore plantation. Marcus had been tracking a deer when he encountered the cub, approximately 3 months old and weighing roughly 35 pounds, sitting beside the body of its mother, who'd been killed by wolves approximately 12 hours earlier, based on the blood trail and predator tracks visible in the area. The cub was malnourished, dehydrated, and would die within 2 or 3 days without intervention because bear cubs remain dependent on their mothers for food and protection until approximately 18 months of age. Marcus faced a decision in that moment. Leave the cub to die naturally. Kill it for its pelt, which would be worth approximately $3. Or attempt to raise it despite the enormous risk that discovery would mean severe punishment from Whitmore for misusing plantation time and resources on personal projects. "You're going to get me killed if anyone finds out about you," Marcus said quietly to the cub as he made his decision, wrapping it in his hunting coat and beginning the 4-mile walk back toward the plantation, though not to the main buildings where discovery would be immediate. Instead, Marcus carried the cub to a section of forest within 1 mile of the plantation boundaries, an area dense enough with undergrowth that it was rarely visited by other enslaved workers or by overseers, where Marcus had previously discovered a small cave approximately 8 feet deep and 6 feet wide that would serve as secure hiding place for an animal that needed to be kept secret. "But I'm going to raise you anyway, and maybe someday you'll be useful for something more than just being a pet." The raising process that began in April 1843 required extraordinary dedication and secrecy maintained over 8 years, while Brutus grew from a 35-pound cub to a 420-pound adult male bear. Bear cubs in the wild nursed from their mothers until approximately 6 months of age, then transitioned to solid food consisting of berries, insects, small animals, and vegetation. Marcus had to replicate this feeding pattern using resources he could divert from plantation supplies without detection. Milk stolen in quantities of 1 pint per day from the dairy operation, then transitioning to scraps of meat saved from his own food rations, then teaching the cub to forage for berries and insects in the forest. The feeding schedule required Marcus to visit the cave twice daily, early morning before work assignments began and late evening after work ended, walking the 1-mile distance regardless of weather or exhaustion from 12-hour days of plantation labor. "You're getting bigger," Marcus observed in August 1843, 4 months after finding the cub. During an evening feeding session, where he'd brought approximately 1 pound of meat scraps and was watching Brutus, now weighing approximately 80 pounds, tear into the food with increasing strength and coordination. "At this rate, you'll be full grown in maybe 6 or 7 years. And then you'll be big enough and strong enough to do what I've been thinking about since the day I found you. You're going to help me kill the people who think they own me. You're going to be my weapon." The training process that transformed Brutus from a wild bear into a controlled weapon began in 1845, when the bear was approximately 2 years old and weighed approximately 250 pounds, large enough to be dangerous, but young enough that behavioral conditioning was still possible. Marcus had observed bear behavior extensively during his 16 years of hunting and understood that bears could learn through repetition and reward, particularly when training began during the juvenile period before adult independence patterns became fixed. The training system Marcus developed involved 3 core elements: establishing dominance, so Brutus accepted Marcus as the pack leader whose commands must be followed; teaching attack and retreat commands using specific verbal cues that Brutus would associate with immediate actions; and conditioning Brutus to associate certain visual and scent markers with attack targets, while remaining calm around Marcus and selected other individuals. "Come," Marcus said sharply during a training session in March 1845, using a verbal command that he'd repeated approximately 400 times over the previous 2 months, while simultaneously pulling on a rope collar around Brutus's neck. The bear, now 250 pounds, and capable of killing Marcus with a single swipe if he chose to resist the training, hesitated for approximately 3 seconds, then walked toward Marcus as the rope pulled, and as Marcus offered a reward of dried meat for compliance. "Good. That's the command for approach. When I say come, you approach. When I say stay, you remain still. When I say attack, you attack the target. And when I say stop, you stop immediately and retreat. Those 4 commands are going to keep me from being killed by you, and are going to let me use you to kill other people." The attack training was the most dangerous and complex element because it required teaching Brutus to attack specific targets on command while reliably stopping on command to prevent uncontrolled violence that would expose the training and lead to discovery. Marcus began with small targets, using old clothing stuffed with straw to create human-shaped training dummies that he positioned in the forest clearing near Brutus's cave. The training sessions followed a consistent pattern. Marcus would issue the attack command using a specific tone and volume that differed from his normal speaking voice. Brutus would attack the dummy with full force, including clawing and biting. And after approximately 10 to 15 seconds, Marcus would issue the stop command that required Brutus to immediately disengage and retreat to Marcus's side, where he received food reward for compliance. "Attack," Marcus commanded during a training session in September 1845, 6 months into the attack conditioning, his voice sharp and aggressive, as he pointed toward a straw dummy positioned 20 feet away at the edge of the clearing. Brutus, now weighing approximately 280 pounds, lunged at the dummy with explosive speed, covering the 20-foot distance in less than 2 seconds, and striking the target with enough force that the supporting post snapped and the dummy collapsed. Brutus's claws tore through the straw-stuffed clothing, his jaws bit into the dummy's neck area, and his weight crushed the structure beneath him. The attack lasted approximately 12 seconds before Marcus issued the stop command. "Stop!" Marcus shouted, using the same sharp tone he'd conditioned Brutus to associate with immediate cessation of all aggressive behavior. Brutus released the dummy, turned away from the destroyed target, and walked back to Marcus's position, where he sat down and waited for the food reward that Marcus provided from a leather pouch containing dried meat pieces. "Good. That's exactly what I need. Full aggression on command, immediate stop on command. Now we need to practice this maybe 500 more times until it's completely reliable, even when you're fully grown and even when the target is a real human instead of a straw dummy." The conditioning process continued for 5 more years, from 1845 to 1850, during which time Marcus conducted approximately 1,800 training sessions, averaging 3 sessions per week, each session involving multiple repetitions of the attack-stop command sequence. By 1850, when Brutus was fully mature at approximately 420 pounds and possessed bite force estimated at 1,200 pounds per square inch and swipe force capable of breaking human bones with single strike, the conditioning was reliable enough that Marcus could command attacks and stops in various contexts, including nighttime sessions, sessions with multiple distractions present, and sessions where Brutus was already agitated from hunger or territorial instincts. But training a bear to attack on command was only half of Marcus's plan. The second half required conditioning Brutus to associate specific scent and visual markers with attack targets so that Marcus could designate who should be attacked without being present during the actual attack, creating plausible deniability that the bear's actions were natural behavior rather than directed assassination. The scent conditioning began in 1848, when Marcus started collecting clothing items and personal objects from Richard Whitmore, taking small items like handkerchiefs or work gloves that Whitmore had worn and which carried his scent, and presenting these items to Brutus during training sessions while simultaneously issuing attack commands. "This is the target scent," Marcus explained to Brutus during a conditioning session in June 1848. Holding one of Whitmore's handkerchiefs approximately 6 inches from Brutus's nose, and allowing the bear to thoroughly smell the fabric for approximately 30 seconds. "When you smell this scent on a person, that person is the target. When I say attack and this scent is present, you attack the source of the scent. When this scent is not present, you do not attack even if I say attack. The scent identifies the target. Do you understand?" The question was rhetorical because bears don't understand human language beyond conditioned command associations. But Marcus continued talking during training sessions because the verbal explanation helped him process the ethical complexity of what he was planning. Using an animal he'd raised from infancy to commit murders that would ultimately free enslaved people, but would also make Marcus responsible for human deaths. The scent conditioning required approximately 400 repetitions over 2 years, from 1848 to 1850, before Brutus reliably associated Whitmore's scent with attack behavior. Marcus would present the scent, issue the attack command, reward Brutus when he attacked the scented target, and repeat the sequence until the association was automatic. By June 1850, Brutus would attack any target that carried Whitmore's scent within 30 seconds of being given the attack command, and would ignore targets without the scent even when commanded to attack, demonstrating that the scent conditioning had overridden the verbal command in the behavioral hierarchy. "We're ready," Marcus told Brutus during their final training session before the planned first assassination, speaking quietly in the forest clearing where they'd spent 7 years developing the system that would soon be used for deadly purpose. You're 8 years old now. You weigh 420 pounds. You can kill a human in less than 5 seconds. You attack on command and stop on command. You target the scent I show you. Tomorrow, we're going to use all this training for its real purpose. We're going to kill Richard Whitmore. And after Whitmore, we're going to kill 5 more plantation owners over the next 4 years. And when we're done, maybe some people will be free because their owners are dead and the estates fall apart. That's the plan. That's why I've spent 7 years of my life raising you and training you instead of letting you die in 1843. But Marcus needed an opportunity to execute the plan without immediate suspicion falling on him or on Brutus. Plantation owners were valuable property themselves in the economic system of 1850s Tennessee, and their deaths would trigger investigations that could potentially discover the trained bear if those investigations were thorough. Marcus needed the death to appear completely natural, as though Whitmore had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time when a wild bear attacked, with no evidence suggesting that the bear had been trained or directed. The opportunity came on July 23, 1851, 1 week after the photograph was taken, when Richard Whitmore announced he would be conducting a solo hunting expedition in the forest section where Brutus's cave was located. Marcus, I'm going hunting tomorrow morning in the northwest forest section. Whitmore told Marcus on July 22nd during the evening mealtime, when Whitmore sometimes consulted with Marcus about optimal hunting locations and timing. I want to track the black bear that's been seen in that area recently. Several plantation hands have reported bear scat and claw marks on trees in the northwest section. I want to kill it before it becomes a danger to the workers. You'll stay here tomorrow and handle other tasks. I'm hunting alone this time because I want the challenge of taking a bear without assistance. The announcement created perfect conditions for Marcus's plan. Whitmore would be alone in the forest section where Brutus lived. He would be actively seeking bear encounter, and his death would be attributed to the very bear he was hunting. But Marcus needed to ensure Brutus attacked Whitmore rather than avoiding him, which required staging the encounter so that Whitmore's scent would be present, and the attack command would be given at the appropriate moment. Mr. Whitmore, if you're hunting the bear in the northwest section, you should know that bears are most active near water sources in the early morning, Marcus said, providing legitimate hunting advice while simultaneously planning Whitmore's death. There's a creek approximately 3 miles into the northwest section that would be the most likely location for bear activity, between 6 and 8 a.m. If you position yourself near that creek at dawn, you'll probably encounter the bear. But, sir, you should be careful. A bear in its own territory is extremely dangerous. Even experienced hunters have been killed by bears they underestimated. The warning was accurate and would later support the narrative that Marcus had tried to caution Whitmore about the danger, creating no suspicion that Marcus had wanted the encounter to occur. Whitmore dismissed the warning with the arrogance of a wealthy man who believed his experience and firepower made him superior to any animal. And the next morning, July 23rd, he departed for the northwest forest section at approximately 5:45 a.m., carrying a rifle loaded with 2 shots and confident he would return with a valuable bear pelt and enhanced reputation as a hunter. Marcus waited until approximately 6:30 a.m., when Whitmore would be deep in the forest and far from any other plantation workers, then walked to Brutus's cave location carrying items he'd prepared the previous night. Whitmore's hunting jacket that had been hanging in the plantation house, and which Marcus had stolen specifically because it was saturated with Whitmore's scent from years of use, and a leather pouch containing dried meat rewards for Brutus. The walk took approximately 18 minutes, and when Marcus reached the cave clearing, Brutus was already alert, having heard Marcus's approach and recognizing his footsteps from 8 years of daily visits. "Today's the day," Marcus said quietly to Brutus. his heart rate elevated from both physical exertion and awareness of what he was about to set in motion. The target is in the forest right now, approximately 1 mile south of here, probably near the creek, like I told him to go. You're going to smell this jacket. You're going to track the scent to its source. And when you find the source, you're going to attack. And this time, I'm not going to give the stop command. This time, you're going to attack until the target is dead. Do you understand? Marcus held Whitmore's jacket directly in front of Brutus's face, allowing the bear to smell the fabric thoroughly for approximately 45 seconds. Watching as Brutus's behavior shifted from calm alertness to focused aggression that Marcus had seen hundreds of times during training sessions when scent conditioning was being reinforced. Brutus understood at some instinctive level that the scent meant attack target. And when Marcus removed the jacket and pointed south toward the direction where Whitmore was hunting, Brutus began moving immediately, his 420-pound bulk surprisingly quiet in the forest, as 8 years of living wild had maintained his natural stealth despite the conditioning that had made him a controlled weapon. "Find him," Marcus said, issuing the tracking command he developed during later training stages. "Find the scent source and attack. No stop command this time. Attack until he's dead. Go." Brutus disappeared into the forest at approximately 6:52 a.m., moving south toward the creek where Whitmore was positioned. Marcus remained at the cave clearing, sitting on the same tree stump that had been visible in the photograph taken 1 week earlier, and waited for the sounds that would confirm his plan's success. Human screaming, gunshots that would likely miss because Whitmore would be panicking, and then silence that would mean Whitmore was dead and the first assassination was complete. The sounds came approximately 11 minutes later at 7:03 a.m., carried through the forest with surprising clarity. Whitmore's voice shouting, "Bear! Jesus Christ, a bear!" followed by 2 gunshots in rapid succession that echoed through the trees, followed by approximately 45 seconds of screaming that diminished from terror to gurgling, and then stopped completely. Marcus sat on the stump and waited for Brutus to return, which happened approximately 9 minutes after the screaming stopped, at 7:12 a.m. The bear emerged from the forest, moving slower than he'd departed, his mouth and front paws bloody from the attack, his eyes still showing the focused aggression that Marcus had conditioned through years of training. Brutus approached Marcus directly and sat down beside the stump, waiting for the food reward that had always followed successful attacks during training sessions. "Good," Marcus said quietly, opening the leather pouch and feeding Brutus several pieces of dried meat while simultaneously processing the reality that he'd just used a bear to commit his first murder. "You did exactly what I trained you to do. Whitmore is dead, and now we need to wait approximately 2 hours before anyone discovers his body. And when they do, they'll find evidence of a bear attack, and they'll assume it was random wildlife violence. Nobody's going to suspect that the bear was trained to target him specifically. We're safe. For now." Chapter 2. Richard Whitmore's body was discovered at 9:37 a.m. on July 23, 1851, by 2 enslaved field workers who'd been sent to search for him when he failed to return from his solo hunting expedition by mid-morning. The discovery site was located 2.8 miles northwest of the main plantation buildings, approximately 140 feet from the creek, where Marcus had suggested Whitmore would find the bear. In a clearing surrounded by pine trees that showed claw marks consistent with bear territorial marking. Whitmore's body showed massive trauma. His throat had been torn open by what forensic examination would later determine were bite wounds measuring 4.3 inches across, consistent with adult male brown bear dentition. His chest had been crushed by an estimated 420 pounds of weight applied during the attack, and his right arm had been severed at the elbow by a swipe powerful enough to break both radius and ulna bones cleanly. The rifle he'd been carrying was found 23 feet from his body, both shots expended, suggesting he'd fired at the attacking bear but missed or failed to hit vitally. Death had occurred from exsanguination combined with massive chest trauma. Estimated time of death between 7 and 7:15 a.m. based on body temperature and rigor mortis progression. This was a bear attack, no question. The local sheriff, a man named Thomas Garrett, who'd been summoned to investigate because plantation owner deaths required official documentation, announced after examining the scene for approximately 45 minutes. The wounds are consistent with brown bear, probably male given the size indicators. The claw marks on the surrounding trees suggest this bear has been using this territory for some time. Mr. Whitmore was hunting alone, encountered the bear in its own territory, fired twice but missed, and was killed in the resulting attack. This is tragic but not suspicious. Bear attacks kill maybe 2 to 3 hunters per year in this county. Mr. Whitmore was unlucky. The official determination of accidental death from wildlife attack rather than murder meant no criminal investigation was opened. No suspects were questioned. And Marcus remained completely free of suspicion, despite being the person who'd suggested the hunting location and who'd trained the bear that had killed Whitmore. The plantation ownership passed to Whitmore's younger brother, James Whitmore, who'd been living in Nashville working as a merchant, but who returned to take control of the estate and its 67 enslaved workers. James was less interested in plantation management than his deceased brother had been and hired an overseer named Calvin Mitchell to handle daily operations while James focused on maximizing profit through cotton production rather than the tobacco and hunting operations Richard had maintained. "Marcus, you're being reassigned from hunting to field work," Calvin Mitchell announced on August 2, 1851, 10 days after Richard Whitmore's death. During a meeting where Mitchell was restructuring work assignments to focus on cotton cultivation. The new owner doesn't want resources devoted to hunting operations. "You'll work in the fields like everyone else. Your hunting skills aren't needed anymore." The reassignment threatened Marcus's entire assassination plan because field work required 12-hour days under direct overseer supervision, leaving no time for the twice-daily visits to Brutus's cave that were necessary for maintaining the bear's conditioning and for planning future attacks. Marcus needed to preserve his access to the forest and to Brutus, which required convincing Mitchell that hunting operations were still valuable. "Mr. Mitchell, the hunting operations generate approximately $240 annually in meat and fur sales," Marcus said, presenting the economic argument that he knew would resonate with an overseer focused on profitability. "If you reassign me to field work, you lose that revenue stream. Cotton cultivation might generate more total revenue, but the hunting operations are profitable enough to justify maintaining them as a secondary income source. And sir, with respect, the bear that killed Mr. Richard Whitmore is still in the forest. That bear needs to be killed before it attacks other plantation workers. I'm the most experienced hunter on this property. You need me to kill that bear." Mitchell considered the argument for approximately 30 seconds, calculating the revenue loss from eliminating hunting operations against the labor value of assigning Marcus to field work. "You can continue hunting 3 days per week," Mitchell finally decided. "The other 4 days you work the fields, and your primary hunting objective is to kill that bear before it causes more problems. Bring me that bear's pelt within 3 months, or I'm reassigning you to full-time field work. Understood?" The compromise gave Marcus sufficient access to maintain Brutus's conditioning while also establishing perfect cover for remaining in the forest. He was now explicitly tasked with hunting the very bear he controlled, creating a situation where Marcus could spend extensive time in the forest without suspicion while supposedly tracking an animal that he had no intention of killing. Over the next 3 months, Marcus conducted fake tracking expeditions where he claimed to be following bear sign but actually was visiting Brutus's cave to maintain feeding and training routines. and he periodically reported to Mitchell that the bear was proving elusive, but that he was getting closer to locating its den. The second assassination occurred on November 14, 1852, 15 months after Whitmore's death, targeting a plantation owner named Harrison Fletcher, who owned property adjacent to the Whitmore plantation and who employed 89 enslaved workers in cotton cultivation. Fletcher was known among the enslaved community as particularly brutal, using systematic violence to enforce productivity quotas and selling workers to Deep South plantations as punishment for minor infractions. Marcus had selected Fletcher as the second target, both because eliminating him would improve conditions for 89 enslaved people, and because Fletcher's plantation bordered the forest section where Brutus lived, making it geographically convenient for staging an attack that would appear as natural wildlife encounter. Fletcher's been complaining about livestock losses in his northwest pasture. Marcus mentioned casually to Calvin Mitchell during a conversation on November 10, 1852, 4 days before the planned assassination. He thinks a bear might be killing his cattle. He's been telling neighbors he's going to hunt the bear himself this week. That's probably the same bear that killed Mr. Richard Whitmore last year. I should warn Fletcher that bear hunting alone is dangerous, especially if it's the same bear that already killed one experienced hunter. The warning served dual purposes. It established Marcus's awareness of Fletcher's hunting plans, and it created documentation that Marcus had tried to prevent Fletcher from engaging in the dangerous activity that would soon kill him. Mitchell agreed that Marcus should warn Fletcher, and 2 days later, Marcus walked to Fletcher's plantation under the pretext of discussing the bear problem, bringing with him a cloth that had been worn by Fletcher and which Marcus had acquired 3 months earlier during a regional church service where enslaved people from multiple plantations gathered, and where Marcus had deliberately stolen the cloth from Fletcher's carriage. "Mr. Fletcher, I heard you're planning to hunt the bear that's been killing your livestock," Marcus said on November 12th, standing respectfully at a distance appropriate for an enslaved person addressing a white plantation owner. "Sir, that bear killed Mr. Richard Whitmore last year. It's extremely dangerous. If you're going hunting, you should take multiple people with you and bring dogs to track it. Hunting it alone would be very risky." Fletcher dismissed the warning with the arrogance typical of wealthy men who believe their firearms and experience made them superior to any animal. "I don't need help killing a bear, boy. I've been hunting since before you were born. That bear has cost me 3 cattle in the past month, approximately $75 in livestock value. I'm going to kill it on November 14th and recover my losses through the pelt sale. You can go back to your plantation and tell your overseer that Fletcher doesn't need advice from slaves about how to hunt." The insult was deliberate and characteristic of Fletcher's treatment of enslaved people, but it also confirmed the hunting plan that Marcus needed. Fletcher would be alone in the forest on November 14th, creating perfect conditions for Brutus's attack. Marcus returned to the Whitmore plantation, spent the evening of November 13th conditioning Brutus with Fletcher's scent using the stolen cloth, and on the morning of November 14th at approximately 6:15 a.m., he directed Brutus toward Fletcher's plantation with the scent conditioning activated and the implicit understanding that any human carrying that scent should be attacked. The attack occurred at approximately 7:40 a.m. on November 14th, 1852, in the forest section between Fletcher's plantation and the area where Brutus's cave was located. Fletcher's body was discovered at 11:23 a.m. by his overseer, who'd become concerned when Fletcher failed to return from the morning hunt. The wounds were nearly identical to those that had killed Richard Whitmore 15 months earlier. Throat torn open by bear bite, chest crushed by massive weight, arms severed by powerful swipe. The official investigation, conducted by Sheriff Garrett, who'd also handled the Whitmore case, determined the death was accidental wildlife attack with no suspicious circumstances. This is the second bear attack death in 15 months in this county, Sheriff Garrett noted in his report dated November 15, 1852. Both victims were experienced hunters who chose to hunt alone in the same general forest area. Both were killed by what appears to be the same adult male brown bear based on wound pattern analysis. This bear represents a significant danger to the community and should be hunted as a priority. I'm recommending that the county organize a coordinated bear hunt using multiple hunters and trained dogs to eliminate this animal before it kills again. The recommendation created new risk for Marcus, because a coordinated hunt with dogs would likely locate Brutus's cave and discover evidence of human presence, including the feeding areas and training grounds that Marcus had established over 9 years. Marcus needed to either prevent the hunt from occurring or ensure that Brutus survived it without being captured or killed, which required relocating the bear to more remote territory where hunters were unlikely to search. I'll participate in the coordinated hunt. Marcus volunteered when Calvin Mitchell informed him about the planned countywide bear elimination effort scheduled for December 3rd, 1852. But Mr. Mitchell, I think the bear that killed both Mr. Whitmore and Mr. Fletcher has probably moved to more remote territory after being disturbed by human presence. Bears are highly intelligent and avoid areas where they've encountered humans. If the hunt focuses on the northwest forest section, where both deaths occurred, we probably won't find the bear. We should search the areas further north, maybe 8 to 10 miles from here, where bear sightings have been reported, but where there's less human activity. The suggestion was designed to redirect the hunt away from Brutus's actual location, while appearing to be legitimate hunting advice based on Marcus's expertise. Mitchell accepted the recommendation and passed it to the hunt organizers. And when the coordinated hunt occurred on December 3rd, with 14 hunters and 6 tracking dogs, they searched the northern forest areas where Marcus had suggested while Brutus remained safe in his cave miles to the west. The hunt found no evidence of the killer bear and was declared unsuccessful, leading Sheriff Garrett to conclude that the bear had either left the region or was ranging across such a large territory that finding it would require more resources than the county could allocate to the effort. The third assassination occurred on March 8, 1854, 16 months after Fletcher's death, targeting a plantation owner named Samuel Peterson, who operated a cotton plantation with 73 enslaved workers and who was known for selling families apart and for using particularly severe punishment methods. The fourth assassination occurred on August 19, 1854, 5 months after Peterson, targeting Thomas Hendricks, who owned 94 enslaved people and who'd recently purchased Marcus's cousin in a transaction that separated the cousin from his wife and 3 children. The fifth assassination occurred on January 14, 1855, targeting William Morrison, who owned 81 enslaved people and who'd been instrumental in defeating a proposed state law that would have restricted the hours enslaved children could be forced to work. Each assassination followed the same pattern Marcus had established with Whitmore and Fletcher. Identify a target who was both morally objectionable and geographically accessible to Brutus's range. Acquire scent material from the target through theft or other means. Condition Brutus to associate that scent with attack behavior. Create plausible reason for the target to be alone in the forest. Direct Brutus to locate and attack the target. Ensure Brutus returned safely and received reward reinforcement. And maintain the appearance that these were random bear attacks rather than directed assassinations. The pattern was successful 5 times, killing 5 plantation owners across 31 months between November 1852 and January 1855, with each death officially determined to be accidental wildlife encounter despite the statistically improbable clustering of bear attack fatalities among wealthy plantation owners in a 3-county region. 5 bear attack deaths in 3 years in the same general area. Sheriff Garrett observed during a meeting with regional plantation owners on February 3, 1855. 3 weeks after the Morrison assassination. That's approximately 10 times the normal bear attack rate for this region. Gentlemen, I'm starting to think we might be dealing with a rogue bear that has developed unusual aggressive behavior toward humans. This isn't normal wildlife activity. This suggests a specific animal that has lost its natural fear of humans and is actively targeting people. The observation was accurate, but incomplete. Brutus had indeed lost his natural fear of humans through 8 years of conditioning, but his attacks weren't random aggression. They were trained responses to specific scent markers that Marcus had deliberately provided. But Sheriff Garrett's hypothesis that a single rogue bear was responsible for all 5 deaths created both opportunity and danger for Marcus. The opportunity was that focusing on one rogue bear, rather than questioning whether the deaths might be assassinations, meant the investigation remained within the framework of wildlife management, rather than criminal prosecution. The danger was that increased attention on the rogue bear theory would eventually lead to more intensive hunting efforts that might discover Brutus, or might accumulate enough evidence to suggest the bear was trained rather than wild. I've been tracking this bear for 3 years now, Marcus said during the February 3rd meeting, speaking as the county's most experienced hunter who'd been pursuing the killer bear since Richard Whitmore's death. I've found tracks, scat, territorial markings, but I've never gotten close enough for a clear shot. This bear is unusually intelligent and cautious. It avoids areas where it's encountered humans. It ranges across what I estimate is maybe a 50-square-mile territory. Hunting it successfully would require either extraordinary luck or a completely different approach than traditional tracking. What different approach? One of the plantation owners, a man named Charles Bennett, asked with the tone of someone who was frustrated with the failure to eliminate a threat to his social class. We've organized 3 coordinated hunts with dogs and multiple hunters. We've offered bounties totaling $200 for the bear's pelt. We've had the county's best hunter tracking it for 3 years. What else can we do? Marcus had anticipated this question and had prepared an answer that would serve his goals while appearing to be legitimate hunting strategy. We could use bait, Marcus suggested. Bears are attracted to strong food scents. If we established bait stations in various locations across the bear's range, using something like rotten meat or fish, the bear would eventually be attracted to one of the stations. We could position hunters at those stations and wait for the bear to arrive. This is less active than tracking, but potentially more effective for an animal that avoids human presence. The bait station strategy was genuine hunting technique that Marcus knew would be ineffective against Brutus because he'd trained the bear to focus on specific human scents rather than food scents when in hunting mode. But suggesting the strategy created the appearance that Marcus was actively trying to help eliminate the rogue bear while actually proposing a method that would fail. The plantation owners approved the bait station plan, established 6 stations across the region using rotting animal carcasses as attractants, and assigned hunters to rotate through the stations in pairs to wait for the bear's appearance. Over the next 3 months, the bait stations attracted numerous wild animals, including coyotes, foxes, and smaller bears. But Brutus never approached any of the stations because Marcus had carefully ensured that his scent was present near all 6 locations, conditioning Brutus to avoid areas where Marcus had recently been. The 6th and final assassination occurred on June 7, 1855, 43 months after Richard Whitmore's death, and 20 months after the 5th assassination. The target was James Whitmore, the man who'd inherited Richard Whitmore's plantation in 1851 and who Marcus had allowed to live for 4 years while targeting other plantation owners first, but who Marcus had always intended to kill eventually, because eliminating both Whitmore brothers would create estate complications that might lead to mass manumission. James Whitmore had never married, had no children, and his only living relative was a distant cousin in Virginia who had no interest in plantation management. If James died without clear heirs, his estate would enter probate proceedings that could take years to resolve, during which time the enslaved workers might be freed by court order if no one claimed ownership. "I'm going to prove I'm a better hunter than my brother was," James Whitmore announced on June 5, 1855, during a dinner conversation with neighboring plantation owners who'd been discussing the ongoing failure to eliminate the rogue bear. Richard died because he was careless and hunted alone. "I'm going to hunt the same bear, but I'm going to take precautions. I'll hunt alone to prove my skill. But I'll carry 3 rifles instead of 1, and I'll position myself near one of the bait stations where the bear is most likely to appear. I'll kill this bear within a week, collect the $200 bounty, and restore honor to the Whitmore name." The announcement gave Marcus perfect opportunity for the final assassination. James would be alone at a known location. He would be expecting a bear encounter, which meant his guard would be down, and his death would complete the pattern that Marcus had been building for 4 years. Marcus spent the evening of June 6th conditioning Brutus with scent material from James's clothing, and early morning on June 7th, he directed Brutus toward the bait station, where James had positioned himself with 3 loaded rifles, an overconfident belief that superior firepower would overcome the bear that had killed 5 experienced hunters. The attack occurred at approximately 6:47 a.m. on June 7, 1855. James Whitmore managed to fire 4 shots before Brutus reached him, hitting the bear twice in non-vital areas, left shoulder and right hip, that caused injury but didn't stop the attack. Brutus killed James in approximately 18 seconds, suffering 2 bullet wounds that would require Marcus's treatment, but not causing permanent damage to the bear's function. James's body was discovered at 9:15 a.m. by Marcus himself, who'd volunteered to check the bait stations that morning and who found James exactly where Marcus had known he would be, torn apart by bear attack that was identical to the 5 previous deaths. "This bear has killed 6 people in 43 months, Sheriff Garrett announced during the investigation on June 8th. Examining James Whitmore's body and the evidence at the scene, including the 4 expended rifle shots and the blood trail showing the bear had been wounded twice. But this time, we have blood evidence. That bear is injured. Wounded bears typically retreat to their dens and remain there for several days while healing. This is our best opportunity to track and kill this animal. We're organizing an immediate tracking expedition following the blood trail." The blood trail led northwest from the bait station, toward the general area where Brutus's cave was located, but not directly to it, because the wounded bear had followed a circuitous route that Marcus had trained him to use when retreating after attacks. The tracking party of 12 hunters and 4 dogs followed the blood trail for approximately 3.2 miles before it disappeared into a rocky area where blood traces couldn't be detected on stone surfaces. The tracking effort continued for 6 more days, covering approximately 40 square miles of forest territory, but never located Brutus's cave or found any evidence of where the wounded bear had gone. "We've lost the trail," Sheriff Garrett admitted on June 14th, 1 week after James Whitmore's death, during a meeting to discuss whether to continue the tracking effort. "The bear is either dead from its wounds and we'll never find the body, or it survived and has gone to ground somewhere we can't locate. We don't have resources to search indefinitely. I'm calling off the active hunt. The bear killed 6 people, but it's been wounded twice and probably won't survive. Even if it does survive, it will likely avoid human contact in the future because it now associates humans with injury. The threat is probably over." The assessment was incorrect. Brutus had survived his wounds with Marcus's treatment, using basic wound cleaning and herbal remedies that prevented infection. But the decision to end the hunt meant Marcus and Brutus were safe from discovery. More importantly, James Whitmore's death without heirs triggered the estate complications that Marcus had anticipated. The Whitmore plantation entered probate proceedings in June 1855, and because James's distant cousin in Virginia declined to claim ownership of 67 enslaved people who would require active management, the court appointed a trustee to manage the estate while searching for buyers. The search for buyers took longer than expected because Tennessee's plantation economy was showing signs of strain in 1855, and several potential purchasers declined to acquire the Whitmore property after learning about the 6 bear attack deaths that had occurred in the region. The estate remained in probate for 4 years, from 1855 to 1859, during which time the enslaved workers continued laboring on the plantation but under trustee management that was less exploitative than traditional ownership because the trustee's only incentive was maintaining property value until sale rather than maximizing profit through brutal labor extraction. The court has decided that the Whitmore estate cannot be sold as a complete unit because no buyers are willing to pay fair market value. The estate trustee announced on March 14, 1859, during a meeting with the enslaved workers to explain the estate's final disposition. The plantation land will be sold separately from the workforce. And because Tennessee law requires that enslaved people be sold as complete family units when possible, and because separating your families would reduce sale value, the court has decided to offer manumission as an alternative to sale. Any family unit that can pool resources to purchase their freedom at 60% of market value will be freed. Families that cannot raise sufficient funds will be sold to buyers in other states. The offer created unprecedented opportunity that Marcus had been working toward for 8 years since finding Brutus. Marcus had saved approximately $340 over the years through selling game meat and furs on the side, and his extended family of 12 people pooled an additional $280, bringing their total to $620. At 60% of market value, the 12-person family unit was valued at $8,400, and the required purchase price was $5,040. But Marcus negotiated directly with the trustee, arguing that his hunting skills were worth reduced price because he generated significant revenue for the estate over the years. And the trustee agreed to accept $4,800 for Marcus's entire family group. "Where did you get $4,800? The trustee asked Marcus on April 3, 1859, when Marcus presented the money and requested manumission papers for 12 people, including himself, his mother, 2 brothers, 1 sister, and 7 other extended family members. That's an extraordinary amount for enslaved people to have accumulated. I need to verify this money wasn't stolen before I can accept it as payment for manumission." Marcus had anticipated this question and had prepared documentation showing 8 years of legal side income from meat and fur sales, combined with contributions from other family members who'd also saved money through various means. The documentation was sufficient to prove the money was legitimately earned, and on April 17, 1859, the trustee issued manumission papers freeing 12 members of Marcus's family. Over the next 2 months, 31 additional enslaved people from the Whitmore plantation were freed through similar purchase arrangements, bringing the total freed through the estate's unusual disposition to 43 people, all indirectly liberated by the 6 assassinations that Marcus had orchestrated using Brutus over 8 years. "We're free," Marcus told Brutus during their final meeting in the forest on May 2, 1859. 2 weeks after receiving manumission papers. Marcus had brought extra food as a final reward and was explaining the situation even though the bear couldn't understand the implications. The plan worked. 6 plantation owners dead. 43 people freed because the estate fell apart without clear ownership. You did what I trained you to do, and now people are free because of it. But I can't keep visiting you anymore. I'm leaving Tennessee, moving north to Ohio where there's no slavery. You're going to have to live as a wild bear now, like you were supposed to before I found you. No more training, No more conditioning, no more attacks, just be a bear. Marcus walked away from the forest clearing on May 2nd, 1859, and never returned. Brutus lived in the forest for another 7 years, until his death from natural causes in 1866 at approximately age 23. Much longer than the average wild bear lifespan of 15 to 18 years. Suggesting that the care and feeding Marcus had provided during the critical early years had given Brutus a health advantage that persisted after Marcus stopped visiting. No more bear attack deaths occurred in the three-county region after June 1855. And Sheriff Garrett's conclusion that the rogue bear had either died or left the area became the accepted explanation for why the attacks stopped. Marcus Raines moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, in June 1859 with his freed family, worked as a skilled hunter providing game meat to urban markets, earned enough money to purchase a small farm in 1863, and lived until 1897 when he died at age 74 from pneumonia. He never told anyone except his mother about Brutus and the 8-year operation that had killed 6 plantation owners. And his mother died in 1871, taking the secret to her grave. The photograph taken on July 16, 1851, showing Marcus sitting beside Brutus, remained in Marcus's possession until his death, then passed to his daughter, who donated it to the Cincinnati Historical Society in 1923 with the notation, "My father with a bear he befriended during slavery times in Tennessee." Modern historians rediscovered the photograph in 1994 and noticed the unusual clustering of bear attack deaths in the same Tennessee region during the same period when the photograph was taken. Research by Dr. James Patterson, no relation to Harrison Fletcher, published in 1998, documented the 6 deaths and noted that all victims were wealthy plantation owners, all died in similar circumstances, and all deaths occurred within a 50-square-mile area over 43 months, creating a statistical anomaly that had a less than 0.01% probability of occurring naturally. Doorstopper, Patterson's research raised the possibility that the deaths might have been deliberate assassinations rather than random wildlife attacks. But without direct evidence that the bear was trained or that Marcus Raines had any involvement, the research remained speculative rather than conclusive. The photograph was analyzed in 2003 using modern techniques that confirmed the bear was an adult male brown bear weighing approximately 400 to 450 pounds, and that Marcus Raines was positioned within arm's reach of the animal, suggesting unusual comfort level between human and bear that would typically require extensive conditioning. But the analysis couldn't determine whether the bear was trained for attack purposes or was simply a tame animal that Marcus had befriended. Richard Whitmore died July 23, 1851, age 47. Harrison Fletcher died November 14, 1852, age 52. Samuel Peterson died March 8, 1854, age 44. Thomas Hendricks died August 19, 1854, age 51. William Morrison died January 14, 1855, age 49. James Whitmore died June 7, 1855, age 43. 6 plantation owners dead in 43 months. Combined ownership, 491 enslaved people. 43 people freed through estate complications following James Whitmore's death. 1 bear raised from age 3 months to age 8 years. 1 slave hunter who walked away free. That's what happened.